September 19, 1944. Haraucourt, Lorraine, France. The morning fog hung thick across the rolling hills as Captain Jimmy Leach of the 37th Tank Battalion peered through his Sherman's vision slit, his hand trembling slightly as he wrote in his field journal, "The intelligence reports cannot be accurate. No tank can be that superior and yet fall in such numbers." Through the swirling mist, he had just witnessed something that contradicted everything American tankers had been told about German armor superiority. Brand new Panther tanks, fresh from German factories, their 75mm guns capable of penetrating Sherman armor at 2,000 meters, lay burning across the French countryside. 11 destroyed in a single morning engagement. The crews of Combat Command A had achieved what doctrine said was impossible, defeating technologically superior German armor through tactics, training, and terrain. What none of these American tankers fully understood yet was that they were demonstrating the most important military lesson of the Second World War. Victory belonged not to the tank with the thickest armor or the biggest gun, but to the nation that could field trained crews, maintain reliable vehicles, support them with combined arms, and replace losses faster than the enemy could inflict them. The mathematics of Allied victory were being written not in armor thickness or gun caliber, but in production capacity, tactical flexibility, crew training, and logistical excellence that would systematically dismantle the myth of German technical superiority. The myth had been building since September 1942, when the Tiger made its combat debut near Leningrad. German propaganda transformed the new heavy tank into a legend, and Allied intelligence reports confirmed the worst fears. The Tiger I, mounting the fearsome 88mm gun derived from Germany's famous anti-aircraft weapon, represented a quantum leap in tank design. Its frontal armor measured 100mm thick, with the mantlet reaching 120mm. Its sides were protected by 80mm of hardened steel. No Allied tank in service when the Tiger debuted could penetrate this armor at normal combat ranges. The 88mm gun could destroy any Allied tank at distances exceeding 2,000 meters, ranges at which Allied tanks could barely see their targets, much less hit them. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. British tank crews encountering Tigers in Tunisia in early 1943 reported that their Churchill tanks' shells simply bounced off the Tiger's armor from ranges as close as 50 meters. American crews arriving in North Africa faced similar shocks. The Sherman, which had seemed adequate against early Panzer III and Panzer IV models, appeared helpless against this new German behemoth. Stories circulated through Allied units with the speed of wildfire. A single Tiger had destroyed an entire British tank squadron. Tigers shrugged off direct hits that would have obliterated any Allied tank. Each story, whether accurate or embellished, added to the Tiger's mystique. Among the American officers studying these reports was Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, commanding the 37th Tank Battalion of the 4th Armored Division. Unlike many of his contemporaries who despaired at the Tiger's apparent invincibility, Abrams approached the problem analytically. He collected every scrap of intelligence on the Tiger, interviewed tankers who had survived encounters with German heavy armor, and studied the terrain of France where his unit would eventually fight. In his personal journal, now preserved at the Patton Museum, Abrams wrote an entry in March 1944 that revealed his thinking. "The German Tiger is a formidable weapon system, there can be no doubt. But it is a weapon system, not a miracle. It has limitations that our intelligence is only beginning to understand. Weight restricts its mobility. Fuel consumption limits its operational range. Mechanical complexity reduces reliability. Most critically, German doctrine employs these tanks in ways that can be countered by well-trained crews using proper tactics. We must stop thinking of tank warfare as individual duels and start thinking systematically. The tank that arrives at the battle fights effectively as part of a combined arms team, and remains operational throughout the campaign is more valuable than the tank with the thickest armor that breaks down halfway to the fight. This insight would prove prophetic. But before American tankers could put these principles into practice, they first had to face the deadly reality of combat in France. June 6, 1944, the Allied invasion of France, began with the largest amphibious operation in history. Among the thousands of vehicles landed on the Normandy beaches were hundreds of Sherman tanks, the armoured spearhead of American forces. The medium tank M4, designated the Sherman by British forces, had entered production in February 1942. Within 2 years, 11 manufacturing facilities across the United States were producing Shermans at unprecedented rates. The Chrysler Detroit Arsenal tank plant alone produced nearly 18,000 tanks. By war's end, 49,234 Sherman tanks had rolled off American production lines. The production comparison with Germany revealed fundamental strategic differences. Germany built the Tiger as a precision instrument, each vehicle carefully crafted with components manufactured to exacting tolerances. Production was slow, labour-intensive and expensive. A single Tiger required approximately 300,000 man-hours to construct and cost twice as much as a Panzer IV. Between August 1942 and August 1944, only 1,347 Tiger I tanks were completed. The Tiger II saw only 492 units finished before war's end. Total Tiger production of both models reached just 1,839 vehicles. Against tens of thousands of Allied tanks, the arithmetic was brutal and unforgiving. But numbers alone do not win battles, as American tankers learned in Normandy's deadly hedgerows. The bocage country of northwestern France consisted of small fields, bounded by ancient earthen banks topped with dense vegetation. German defenders transformed the bocage into a killing ground. Anti-tank guns positioned behind hedgerows could destroy approaching tanks at point-blank range. Infantry armed with Panzerfaust rockets stalked tanks through the dense terrain. The German Panther tank, mounting a high-velocity 75mm gun and heavily sloped frontal armour, proved nearly as formidable as the Tiger. American tank crews discovered that their training had not prepared them for this environment. The Sherman's 75mm M3 gun could not reliably penetrate the Panther's frontal armour even at close range. The Sherman's relatively thin armour provided little protection against German weapons. Early Sherman models had a disturbing tendency to catch fire when penetrated. The 3rd Armoured Division experienced these problems immediately after landing. In the first 5 weeks of combat, the division lost 128 Sherman tanks destroyed and 273 more damaged. Personnel casualties were severe: 469 killed, 1,934 wounded, 267 missing. Lieutenant Belton Cooper, the division's maintenance officer responsible for recovering damaged tanks, witnessed the carnage firsthand. "I saw tanks hit by 88mm rounds that simply exploded," he wrote. "The crew had no chance to escape. I saw tanks burn with men trapped inside. These were not statistics. These were men I knew, men who climbed into their tanks each morning knowing they might not survive the day, but going anyway because that was their duty." The Sherman crews called their tanks Ronsons after a popular cigarette lighter whose slogan was "Lights first time, every time." German confidence during this period bordered on arrogance. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding a Panzer Grenadier regiment in Normandy, recalled that his crews considered the Sherman easy prey. "The American tank was fast and manoeuvrable," he wrote, "but it was no match for our Panthers and Tigers. Our guns could destroy Shermans at ranges where the Americans could not effectively return fire. We felt confident that even when outnumbered, our superior equipment would prevail. But something was changing. The initial shock of combat was giving way to adaptation. American tank crews developed tactics specifically designed to counter German advantages. They learned to avoid frontal engagements, instead using superior speed to flank German positions. They learned to coordinate with infantry and artillery, using smoke and suppressive fire to close ranges where their guns became effective. They learned terrain exploitation. Most importantly, they learned to think of tank combat not as individual duels, but as team efforts where multiple Shermans working together could overwhelm isolated German tanks. The 2nd Armoured Division developed tactics they called swarming, where 3 or 4 Shermans would simultaneously engage a single German tank from different directions. While the German crew focused on one threat, other Shermans would maneuver to hit the weaker side or rear armour. During the breakout from Normandy in late July, these tactics began producing results. German tanks that had seemed invincible weeks earlier were being destroyed by coordinated Sherman attacks. Mechanical modifications addressed the Sherman's vulnerabilities. engineers added welded armor plates to critical areas. Wet ammunition. Storage, introduced in models produced after March 1944, surrounded ammunition racks with water-filled jackets that prevented fires when the tank was penetrated. This single modification reduced catastrophic fires from 60% to 15%. Tank crews improvised hedgerow cutters from salvaged German beach obstacles, welding steel tusks to Sherman fronts that allowed them to punch through hedgerows rather than climbing over them. The most significant improvement was the 76mm M1 gun, replacing the original 75mm weapon. The new gun fired a heavier shell at higher velocity, giving substantially better armor penetration. A 76mm Sherman could penetrate a Panther's frontal armor at ranges under 600 meters and could reliably penetrate side armor at 1,000 meters. While still inferior to German guns in raw performance, the 76mm gave Sherman crews a fighting chance. The British mounted their excellent 17-pounder anti-tank gun in modified Sherman turrets, creating the Sherman Firefly. The 17-pounder firing armor-piercing discarding sabot rounds achieved muzzle velocities of 3,950 feet per second and could penetrate 210 millimeters of armor at 500 meters, making it capable of destroying even the Tiger II from the front. Over 2,000 Fireflies were produced and distributed to British and Canadian units. German tank crews quickly learned to identify and prioritize Fireflies, recognizing the distinctive longer barrel. British tankers responded by camouflaging Firefly barrels to disguise them as standard Shermans. As summer turned to autumn in 1944, the campaign's nature shifted dramatically. The Allied breakout from Normandy in late July, followed by the encirclement of German forces in the Falaise pocket, shattered German defences. American armoured divisions raced eastward in a pursuit covering hundreds of miles. The rapid advance exposed a critical weakness in German armoured forces that would prove decisive at Aracourt. German heavy tanks consumed fuel at rates German logistics could not sustain. The Tiger I burned through its 125 gallons of fuel in less than 60 miles of cross-country travel. The Tiger II, even heavier at 69 tons, was worse. Allied air superiority had made German logistics a nightmare. Fighter bombers hunted truck convoys mercilessly. Fuel depots were priority bombing targets. Rail lines were cut repeatedly. By September 1944, German armoured units were frequently immobilized by simple lack of fuel. Technical Sergeant James Mitchell, a tank recovery specialist with the 1st Armoured Division, kept meticulous records revealing a startling pattern. During September and October 1944, my unit processed 67 German armoured vehicles in the 3rd Army sector, he recorded. Of these, only 18 showed combat damage. The remaining 49 had been abandoned intact or with minor mechanical failures. Investigation revealed that 31 had been abandoned due to fuel exhaustion, 12 due to transmission failures, and 6 due to track damage. Every single vehicle could have been repaired if the Germans had possessed adequate recovery capabilities. By contrast, we recovered and repaired over 200 American tanks during the same period, returning them to their units within an average of 4 days. This disparity reflected fundamental design differences. The Sherman had been designed for ease of maintenance. Its Ford GAAV-8 engine was reliable and simple to service. The entire power pack could be removed as a unit in under 2 hours. Replacement engines were readily available at forward facilities. The Tiger, by contrast, was a maintenance nightmare. Its Maybach HL-230 engine was complex and temperamental, unable to operate reliably at maximum power. The crew manual recommended limiting engine speed to 2,600 revolutions per minute, rather than the theoretical maximum of 3,000 revolutions per minute. The Tiger's interleaved road wheel system created nightmarish maintenance. To replace an inner road wheel, crews had to remove multiple outer wheels first. In muddy or frozen conditions, the wheels would pack with debris, immobilizing the tank. Worst of all, spare parts were chronically unavailable. German industry, under constant bombing and struggling with raw material shortages, could not produce enough parts. A Tiger with a broken transmission might sit immobilized for weeks waiting for a replacement that never arrived. The Shermans suffered no such problems. American logistics delivered spare parts in quantity to forward facilities. Maintenance crews could keep Shermans running through sustained operations that would have left German tanks deadlined. These systemic advantages were about to be demonstrated dramatically at Aracourt, where Combat Command A of the 4th Armoured Division would prove that well-trained crews in reliable tanks properly supported could defeat superior German armour decisively. The 4th Armoured Division was among the best-trained American armoured units deployed to Europe. Activated in April 1941, the division spent 3 years training stateside before deploying to France in July 1944. Tank battalions practiced gunnery relentlessly, firing thousands of practice rounds until crews could hit moving targets at combat ranges. They studied German tactics until they could predict German responses. By the time they entered combat, 4th Armoured Division crews were as well trained as any armoured force in the world. The division's commander, Major General John Wood, emphasized aggressive tactics and decentralized command, giving subordinate commanders clear objectives and trusting them to execute without micromanagement. Wood also insisted on combined arms integration, ensuring tank units trained constantly with infantry, artillery, engineers, and air support. This training would prove decisive. By mid-September 1944, the division had advanced deep into eastern France as part of Patton's Third Army. Combat Command A, under Colonel Bruce Clark, had crossed the Moselle River and established positions near Aracourt. Clark's force consisted of approximately 3,000 men and 75 Sherman tanks. German intelligence identified the American bridgehead as a threat. Hitler personally ordered the 5th Panzer Army, commanded by General Hasso von Manteuffel, to counterattack and destroy the American forces. Manteuffel assembled substantial forces: the 11th Panzer Division, the 111th Panzer Brigade, and the 113th Panzer Brigade. Total German strength included 262 armoured vehicles, including 107 Panther tanks, 75 Panzer IV tanks, and 80 assault guns. German commanders anticipated quick victory with their numerical superiority and technically superior tanks. What the Germans did not know was that Clark had prepared the battlefield carefully. Intelligence officers had identified likely German approach routes and excellent defensive positions. Artillery officers had pre-plotted defensive fires. Air liaison officers had established procedures for rapid close air support. Tank commanders had personally reconnoitred their sectors, selecting firing positions that maximized cover while providing clear fields of fire. On the morning of September 19th, thick fog blanketed the battlefield, reducing visibility to less than 100 meters. At 8 a.m., elements of the 113th Panzer Brigade attacked from the east and south. The Germans advanced in column formation, expecting to brush aside light screening forces. Instead, they encountered a defense in depth. The first German tanks hit American outposts manned by armored infantry with anti-tank guns. These positions inflicted casualties and bought time. As Panthers pushed deeper, they encountered American tank destroyer platoons in hull-down positions. The M18 Hellcat tank destroyers engaged German tanks at close range through the fog. Several Panthers were destroyed before the Germans realized they were under fire. The Germans pressed forward. As Panthers advanced, they moved into pre-plotted artillery kill zones. American artillery delivered devastating concentrations. The artillery did not destroy many tanks directly, but it separated tanks from supporting infantry and disrupted command and control. Captain Jimmy Leach's B Company, 37th Tank Battalion, waited in carefully selected positions on a low ridge. His 3 platoons provided mutual support while maintaining covered withdrawal routes. His crews waited with engines running, watching through the swirling fog. At 9:30 a.m., German Panthers emerged from the fog less than 400 meters away. Leach's gunner, Staff Sergeant Thomas Riley, acquired the lead Panther and fired. The 75mm armor-piercing round struck the Panther's side armor just below the turret ring. The Panther shuddered to a halt, smoke pouring from its engine deck. Other B Company Shermans opened fire simultaneously. Within seconds, 5 Panthers had been hit, 3 destroyed and 2 damaged. The remaining German tanks attempted to return fire, but their longer-range guns provided no advantage in the fog. American crews, using faster turret traverse and excellent visibility from commander cupolas, could acquire targets faster than German crews. The battle became a close-range fight where American advantages in crew training and teamwork outweighed German advantages in armor and firepower. American tank commanders coordinated fires, concentrating multiple tanks on single targets. German tanks, advancing without reconnaissance and separated by terrain, fought individually and were destroyed piecemeal. The engagement lasted less than 30 minutes. When it ended, 11 German tanks lay destroyed or disabled. B Company had lost one Sherman damaged but repairable. The psychological impact on both sides was profound. American crews, who had been told they needed 5 Shermans to destroy one German tank, had just destroyed 11 Panthers while suffering minimal losses. The myth of German invincibility shattered. German crews experienced shock. New Panther tanks, expected to dominate American armor, had been destroyed with ease. Over the next 11 days, German forces launched repeated attacks, each following a similar pattern. German tanks would advance with inadequate reconnaissance, run into prepared American defenses, and suffer severe losses. American coordination between tanks, artillery, infantry, and air power proved devastatingly effective. On September 20th, the weather cleared enough for American fighter bombers to join the battle. Republic P-47 Thunderbolt fighters struck German armored columns with rockets, bombs, and strafing runs. American forward air controllers radioed target coordinates directly to circling fighters. Response time from request to bombs on target averaged less than 20 minutes. German tanks caught in open terrain by air attacks suffered severe losses. Major Charles Carpenter, an artillery observation pilot flying a small Piper L4 Cub, mounted 6 bazooka rockets on his aircraft. On September 20th, spotting German Panthers advancing toward Aracourt, Carpenter attacked, flying at treetop level and firing his improvised armament. Hits on engine decks could disable tanks. Carpenter made multiple passes, dodging anti-aircraft fire, and was credited with forcing several Panthers to withdraw. His courage earned him the nickname Bazooka Charlie. By September 25th, German attacks had achieved nothing except massive losses. The 113th Panzer Brigade, which entered battle with 88 Panthers, had only 7 operational by battle's end. Total German losses reached 200 armoured vehicles destroyed or abandoned out of 262 committed. American losses were 25 Shermans destroyed and 7 tank destroyers knocked out. The kill ratio exceeded 8-1 in favour of the Americans, directly contradicting every assumption about German armoured superiority. The human cost was severe for German forces. Over 700 German soldiers were killed and 300 wounded. Entire tank crews were lost. Young soldiers with minimal training died in tanks they barely knew how to operate. Experienced crews, veterans who might have made a difference, had mostly been killed in earlier campaigns. Germany's pool of skilled tankers had been depleted by years of attrition, and replacements received training measured in weeks rather than months or years. American casualties were remarkably light. Combat Command A suffered 6 killed and 13 wounded. The disparity reflected tactical success and systemic advantages in crew protection and medical support. Wounded American tankers received immediate attention from battalion aid stations and were evacuated to field hospitals within hours. The aftermath revealed the full extent of German desperation. American recovery crews found dozens of abandoned German tanks showing no combat damage. Tanks had been abandoned when they ran out of fuel, broke down, or became stuck. German recovery capabilities had collapsed. Specialized vehicles needed to tow disabled heavy tanks were destroyed or lacked fuel. American recovery operations, by contrast, were superb. Every armored division included a maintenance battalion equipped with recovery vehicles, mobile repair shops, and abundant spare parts operating continuously. Lieutenant Colonel William Duncan, commanding the 4th Armoured Division's Maintenance Battalion, kept detailed statistics. During September 1944, his battalion recovered 127 damaged Shermans. Of these, 89 were repaired and returned to service within 72 hours. Another 23 required more extensive repairs but were operational within a week. Only 15 were damaged beyond field repair. The repair rate exceeded 88%. The lessons of Aracore spread quickly. Tank crews who had feared German armour discovered they could win through proper tactics and teamwork. The myth of Tiger invincibility crumbled. Commanders realized that systematic advantages in training, logistics, and combined arms coordination outweighed platform-level disadvantages. General George Patton understood the implications immediately. In a letter to General Eisenhower written on September 30th, Patton summarized the battle's significance. The affair at Aracore demonstrates conclusively that American armour, properly handled, is superior to German armour in every respect that matters. While German tanks may possess better guns and thicker armour, our tanks are more reliable, our crews are better trained, our logistics are incomparably superior, and our combined arms coordination is vastly better. The Germans can no longer defeat us through technical superiority. We shall continue to attack and shall continue to win. The 4th Armoured Division would distinguish itself throughout the remainder of the campaign, spearheading Third Army's drive across France and into Germany, eventually advancing over 1,200 miles from Normandy to Czechoslovakia. Its success rested on principles demonstrated at Aracore: aggressive leadership, thorough training, tactical flexibility, combined arms integration, and logistics excellence. But German resistance was not finished. In December 1944, Hitler launched one final desperate offensive in the Ardennes forest, attempting to split Allied armies and capture the vital port of Antwerp. The Battle of the Bulge would test everything American armoured forces had learned and provide the ultimate demonstration that the Sherman was the right tank for the war the Allies were fighting. The Ardennes offensive began on December 16, 1944, with 3 German armies attacking through heavily forested terrain in snow, fog, and bitter cold. The Germans achieved complete surprise, smashing through thinly held American positions and advancing rapidly westward. Tiger and King Tiger tanks spearheaded the assault. For several days, German success seemed possible, but initial success masked fundamental weaknesses that would doom the offensive. The German army attacking in the Ardennes was not the army that had conquered France in 1940. Years of attrition had consumed the best troops and equipment. The panzer divisions were under strength, inadequately trained, and critically short of fuel. German planning assumed they could capture American fuel depots to sustain the advance. When this did not occur, German spearheads ground to a halt. The American response demonstrated flexibility and resilience German planning had underestimated. Within 24 hours, American commanders had identified the threat and begun moving reinforcements. Patton's Third Army disengaged from its offensive, wheeled 90 degrees north, and marched over 100 miles in winter conditions to strike the German southern flank. The movement involved 3 entire divisions, over 133,000 vehicles, completed in less than 48 hours. No other army could have executed such a maneuver with such speed. The Sherman proved perfectly suited for this crisis response. Its reliability meant Shermans completed the long march without excessive breakdowns. Its ease of maintenance meant those that did break down were quickly repaired. Most critically, American logistics ensured Shermans had fuel, ammunition, and spare parts when they reached battle. German tanks increasingly lacked these essentials. As weather cleared on December 23rd, American air power entered the battle with devastating effect. Hundreds of fighter bombers attacked German columns, destroying tanks, trucks, and artillery. Pilots reported German vehicles abandoned along roads, creating massive traffic jams that made ideal targets. In a single day, British Typhoon fighter bombers were credited with destroying 175 German tanks. By early January 1945, the German offensive had been contained and reversed. American armoured divisions counterattacked and drove German forces back. The Battle of the Bulge cost Germany losses it could not replace: 100,000 casualties, 800 tanks destroyed or abandoned, 1,000 aircraft lost. These losses represented Germany's last mobile reserves. The Sherman's role in defeating the Ardennes offensive vindicated every design decision. Its mobility allowed rapid redeployment. Its reliability ensured it reached battles when needed. Its ease of maintenance kept it fighting through sustained operations. Its production volume meant losses could be replaced. Its integration into combined arms teams made it more effective than specifications suggested. As Allied armies crossed the Rhine in March 1945 and drove into Germany, the Tiger had virtually disappeared. Fuel shortages immobilized most remaining Tigers. Those that could move lacked ammunition, spare parts were non-existent, trained crews were dead or captured. Germany's vaunted technical superiority had crumbled under the weight of Allied systematic superiority. The final accounting revealed the totality of Allied success. American, British, and Canadian forces deployed nearly 60,000 tanks to the European theatre, the vast majority Shermans. Against this force, Germany fielded approximately 6,600 Panthers and Tigers combined. The numerical disparity was overwhelming and deliberate. Allied strategy accepted that individual German tanks might be superior, but planned to overwhelm them through mass and systematic advantages. This strategy succeeded completely. By May 8, 1945, when Germany surrendered unconditionally, the question of Sherman versus Tiger had been answered definitively. The technically superior Tiger had failed to prevent German defeat. The adequate Sherman had helped secure Allied victory. The explanation was simple. Wars are not won by superior weapons, but by superior systems employing adequate weapons effectively. The legacy of this victory shaped military thinking for generations. The lesson was clear. Reliability, maintainability, producibility, and systematic integration matter more than maximum performance specifications. Modern military forces understand these principles because the Sherman proved them definitively. The M1 Abrams tank reflects these lessons. It is not the most heavily armoured tank in the world, nor does it mount the most powerful gun, but it is reliable, maintainable, producible at scale, and designed for combined arms operations. The Sherman served far beyond World War II, validating its soundness. In the Korean War, Shermans equipped American and Allied forces, proving effective against North Korean and Chinese armour. Israeli Shermans, extensively modified, fought successfully in multiple wars through 1973. Countries worldwide operated Shermans into the 1980s, an extraordinary service life for a design originating in 1941. The story of how Germany's unstoppable Tigers fell to America's humble Shermans is not about tanks. It is about how nations organize for war, how industrial capacity shapes strategic outcomes, how training and doctrine multiply effectiveness, and how systematic thinking defeats narrow technical excellence. These lessons transcended World War II and continue to influence how militaries organize, train, equip, and fight today. The humble Sherman, dismissed by many as inadequate, proved adequate to its task and more. It was produced in numbers that overwhelmed German defences. It was reliable enough to reach battles when needed. It was maintainable enough to keep fighting through sustained operations. It was crewed by soldiers who learned to employ it effectively. It was supported by logistics ensuring fuel, ammunition, and spare parts. It was integrated into combined arms teams that multiplied effectiveness. These unglamorous qualities proved more important than armour thickness or gun calibre. The Tiger failed not because it was poorly designed, but because excellence in isolation cannot overcome systematic disadvantage. No matter how formidable an individual German tank might be, it could not overcome Allied advantages in production, logistics, training, doctrine, and combined arms coordination. The Tiger represented the apex of German engineering excellence, but engineering excellence alone cannot win wars. In the final analysis, the Sherman defeated the Tiger because the Sherman was part of a winning system while the Tiger was not. That simple truth determined the outcome of armoured warfare in World War II and continues to shape military thinking today. The lesson, written in burning tanks across European battlefields, remains relevant. Adequate equipment, employed effectively through superior systems, defeats superior equipment employed through inadequate systems. The Sherman proved this principle. The Tiger validated it through failure. Together they taught the modern world how wars are actually won.